we've got like 45 minutes, maybe a little bit longer if we need to, and we're here to talk adoption. In my opinion, and I know there are people on here that agree with this opinion, in my opinion, the biggest issue to face successful HubSpot implementation, and consequent, I think what people maybe don't appreciate necessarily, is the effectiveness of HubSpot, and even then the effectiveness of the strategies that you're employing in your business. So if you're using HubSpot to underpin your growth strategies, your go-to-market strategies, as they call it, a lack of adoption is going to screw that right up. This is how big a deal adoption is in my mind. We've specialized in it in our business, a sponsor of the South Wales HUG. We specialized in it now for coming up for a year. Myself and Chris Carolan have talked a lot about it. Myself and Chris Barnett have talked a lot about it from his perspective as a Superb leader over at Superb. Richard is my partner in crime. These guys will just give 2 minutes of themselves in a moment. And Paul, if he ever appears, you can hear us, Paul. I can hear you.
Yeah, I can certainly hear you. I can see you. I'm just trying to get my camera's privacy settings sorted out.
It's probably best if we can't see you.
You're right.
Met you before. So Paul also works with us on adoption in a bigger sense. Right. Let's kick in. Chris B. Can I call you Chris B?
That's my internal moniker at Super. So,
absolutely. Do you want to kick us off and just like a real short introduction, who you are and why you're here, perhaps, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So I am Crispy, as I'm famously known as nowadays. I built a HubSpot solution partner agency up to elite. It sold it last year and leveraged Superb and adoption techniques to scale all of my service offerings in order to successfully sell. And so now I lead channel here at Superb, and I help partners grow better in the HubSpot ecosystem. So that's what I do. And
fantastic. Thank you very much. And if it's not already clear, as Real Inbound, not as the HUG, as Real Inbound, we are Superb partners as well. We've literally built in our business around the functionality that Superb provides us in terms of overcoming this adoption issue. Chris Carolan, legend of HubSpot content marketing, maven.
The power of becoming a creator after only 1 year, legendary status.
Tell us who you are.
HubSpot coach on the daily, focused a lot on awareness so that stuff can be adopted. Do that by last year started creating shows daily on LinkedIn, did over 350 last year. Most of them starting with the 2 words, let's build, which you might know. Got to enjoy a Let's Build HubSpot Adoption series that we're still doing, me and Tony, every Monday. And that has led to something pretty special happening tomorrow that I can't share all the details on.
Seismic.
Just trying to...
Seismic, Chris. Seismic is the word you're looking for.
Yeah, trying to solve this knowledge gap so that people can understand that HubSpot is no longer just a marketing and sales tool.
Fantastic.
Glad to be here today.
Brilliant. And thank you for both. Thank you both for showing up. It's very much appreciated. I don't think it's coincidental that we've got, I think, the biggest audience on our HUG that we've ever had, because we managed to get you big hitters on. Richard, would you like to introduce yourself? Richard is our head of delivery at Real Inbound, consequently works in adoption every day. Do you want to give a quick background to yourself, Rich?
Of course. Hello, everybody. Thanks for the intro, Tony. And it's great to be on here with such a good set of people. My background is in mainly in media, but also deeply in marketing, digital marketplaces, recruitment, e-commerce. Often from an SEO perspective, but also building CMSs and things like that. HubSpot is a fair extension of all those kind of skills learned over many, many years in the trenches. So it was a nice logical step to jump into business with Tony, who I'd worked with before quite a lot and got on famously well with. And I'm pleased to be here.
Thanks, Rich. And Paul, the invisible man, you'll recognize him because he's the only non-UK or US accent, I'm sure. Oh, actually, no, that's not true, because we've got Peter who's in Finland. Paul is head of strategy for Real Inbound, amongst his many other undertakings, and literally is on the sharp end of adoption. We work with Paul to put adoption solutions together. Paul, would you just like to give us a little bit of insight into, again, who you are and why you're here?
Sure. Thanks for that, Tony. There's not much I can add to that. First of all, I can't switch the privacy setting off on my camera. So and every time I do, it switches back on again. So my apologies for that. But I've been in management consulting for a couple of decades, helping many businesses realize their strategies, operational improvement, strategy realization, really broad-based experience, and really zeroing in now on problem that is quite pervasive out there. And I think few people are really accurately identifying it, and that is the digital adoption. And obviously at the spearhead of this is CRM adoption for us. That's me. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Right. Before we kick off, I feel like most of us here are within the ecosystem, the HubSpot ecosystem. You could argue HubSpot side, as in not client side. You just put it in the chat for me so I can help gauge where we go with this. Because if we're all more or less on the same side, we'll have a certain type of conversation, right? If we're more client side, we'd perhaps have a different conversation. Can you just say whether you're H HubSpot side or C client side? Just real quickly so we can see who's in. Very H-y. Tara, thanks for coming. Client side, that's awesome. Great to see your client side person in. Craig, yeah, we're going to be, there's a lot of HubSpotters here, I think.
Peter's on the, I thought you're a client side. Peter, have you made a change? You joined the agency world or others? Maybe HubSpot itself?
Maybe I've just confused him with my entry. Okay, so let's talk about it. So we'll certainly talk about client from a client perspective, because we have to talk about it from the client perspective. Oh, there you go. Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Well, good luck, Peter. This is a start of a beautiful new work time for you in your life. Fingers crossed. But let's
South Wales exclusive.
Yes, South Wales exclusive. Let's kick off. What the format will be, I've got like three really simple questions, and I want each of the experts on the call to give their 2 pence worth, right? To put their input into those questions. First question is rather obviously, what is adoption? So perhaps in the same order, Chris, then Rich, then Paul. If you could give us that, just hold forth for a couple of minutes on what do we mean when we talk about adoption? And we all had a bit of a chuckle at the start. This is an issue we face every day. What are we talking about? Chris B, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So I'll define this in the way that I used to when I was a partner, and it's I'll describe the main KPI of a service provider, like even transcending the world of HubSpot, going beyond that. The main KPI of a service provider is not like, did you onboard HubSpot? That's not it. It's, do your users use the thing that you have designed? Like, that is your KPI as a service partner. It's that exactly. And so adoption is, have you enabled and empowered the end users that you are designing for to do their job successfully? That is it in short to me.
Excellent. And have you used specific measures for that in the past? You mentioned KPIs. Do you report against it for the clients in previous lives?
Yeah, there's tons of ways to measure this. Mainly it's, if you want to measure this from a data standpoint, it's going to be activation features. So, do they use, sequences or meeting links or whatever it is if you're referring to the world of HubSpot? And so activation metrics, which can be measured in your own HubSpot partner account to understand how an end customer is using the instance, is extremely important, as well as, if you want to go beyond that and figure out, are they using the tools in a way that subscribes to a certain methodology? And so I know that RevOps is a hot word. GTM engineering is coming out as another hot word. I don't know what that means just yet, but I'll find out. And so it's about, have you enabled and empowered the user to adopt tools right? As well as processes and platforms and other, pieces of technology and things like that. And so when you think about adoption, I think a lot of people think about, am I going to measure this as far as do they use X, Y, and Z tools? It's like, yes. And have they adopted the methodology behind the scenes that makes this possible, right? So are we thinking about scale? Are we thinking about how this factors into that RevOps journey? Are we thinking about, other things like that? And so I would say it transcends service as well as transcends platform.
Great. I like that. Thanks, Chris. Chris, what about you? We talk a lot about adoption, so I know you've got lots of varied perspectives on this.
Well, I don't want to make it too complex. It's just as simple as Crispy mentioned. Are they using the tool? Are they using it successfully? Do they understand why they're using it? And for me, there's an extra layer of awareness around like what the platform is. So many times there's a disconnect when we see it as marketing sales or sales CRM, and empowering users to be able to explore in a way that they really can't often in other systems that are built more from an IT project perspective, like stay in your lane. If not, you might break something. So I find that awareness, trying to empower users with that so that as they're racing to meet customer expectations every day, maybe there's a tool sitting alongside them that if they just clicked over, they'd be able to handle and also like, make sure their own processes, like take a little ownership of their own processes as they start to use HubSpot as well.
That's
So
perfect, Chris. Because this is what I'm trying to eke out is, it's more than just switching on HubSpot, adding to your 365, sending emails through. Brilliant. Rich, what would you add for me for that? What is adoption?
I'm going to start by saying I think I feel for Paul a little because I think this river might runneth dry by the time we get to Paul.
No, he's got something to add. Don't you worry.
Yeah, I know. We'll just have a chat. I think trying to add more to what my esteemed experts have said already, but I think that adoption is fully complete when your business is more or less run almost top to bottom through whatever platform. Actually, I mean, obviously it's different per platform because you might not be running your whole business through it, but something like HubSpot gives you the opportunity to sort of run and manage your digital business almost. If you really do use all of it, you really could run nearly all the business through it, I believe. And not just believe, I think it's got all the elements in there, and it is much more, as Chris Carolan was talking about earlier on, not just being sales and marketing, but the way it's evolved into being a full end-to-end customer platform, and adopting that fully for your digital business, obviously subject to the size of your business, I think is a goal that fully sort of encapsulates adoption for me. So I'm not going to go any further than that.
Oh, lovely. Thanks, Rich. And again, just add into that story. We're not just talking about training people in the use of HubSpot.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get to. Paul, would you just like to round that off?
Sure. So I'm pretty much in agreement with what everyone else has said so far. It's digital adoption, HubSpot adoption being a sort of subcategory, although it's really about the integration, the enablement and utilization of the tool to enhance capacity, productivity, and quality in the operations of a business. Being digital, capacity, increasing time, 24 hours, 24/7, productivity, doing things so much faster, and the quality doing it consistently well as it's been told to do. And that pretty much, to do that, and also enabling just to scale. So I think the key word out of that I'd leave with you is proper integration into really the operations and management of a business.
Yeah, excellent. So that's perfect context from everybody there. When we talk about adoption, we're not just talking about training in the tool. We're not just doing the HubSpot Academy course to learn how to use the email or the campaigns tool or something like that. We are potentially talking about HubSpot as a catalyst for transformation in the whole org. I think that's the exciting piece here. So again, me and Chris talk about this every week. It's not the point tools that are that are really interesting. And the reason we use Supered is to spread that word, that messaging. Yeah, there's an aspect of this which is technical, which is how do I do this thing? How do I build a workflow? How do I see why my workflow is not enrolling people and so on? But it's also about what does the company want to achieve? How's it going to achieve it? What does it look like if we're winning? What does it look like if we're losing? How does that in itself, how does the tool and adoption in itself move the business forward towards where it wants to be? Fantastic. So that means adoption. I know this probably, I'm a bit biased, but that means adoption is super important. That's why I lead by saying I think it's the most important element of your HubSpot implementation. And perhaps, Paul, you can kick us off this time. If each of you, hopefully if this works, each of you will come up with an aspect of why adoption fails. That will be individual. There's at least a dozen of them, I'm sure. If we can reverse, Paul, in your view,
Okay.
given how important it is, why does it fail?
Right. So, I mean, there are many reasons why things can fail. I mean, it's like integrating with other systems, data, all those sort of technical things, but those are all fixable. The stickiest one comes in my experience, but is change management, not at an operator or user level, but at a management level. Because it's the managers that are actually the catalyst to bring it into play, to make the decision to bring it into the organization in the first place. But then it's also the burden is on their shoulders to then carry it forward and lead it going forward. And I think as we've experienced quite recently, Tony, when a manager suddenly who's skilled and has been promoted to their level as a chief firefighter, and they are recognized and identified as such, even socially within an organization, and then suddenly those issues go away and they're left in this vacuum because the system is now dealing with those problems, they're going to become resistant. It's I suppose one of the biggest challenges they have is what are they then going to do with the time that they're being given back? They're no longer busy, and they associate their value with how busy they are and the problems that they're fixing. They don't associate their value to the cost that they are to the business by continually perpetuating problems. So I think that's the main reason. It sits at management level. It needs to be addressed at a management level, and unless you can crack that, I mean, that's where the thinking starts and action flows from thinking, right? And if that thinking doesn't change, then those actions to properly adopt and integrate the system in the business going forward is not going to happen, not going to flow.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. And Michael's witnessed that with in the chat. We fell because we're afraid to change process, and people who have used these processes for 20 years. In those circumstances, it's so difficult. It is so difficult. It doesn't matter whether it's HubSpot or anybody else, any kind of change from the way we do things. But that's what management's about, isn't it? Management is about managing behaviors in order to get to the outcomes that we want to get to. Rich, it's quite a difficult question, I know, but could you move away from the change management aspect? Is there anything like practical that affects adoption? What things that you see in terms of delivering HubSpot that screw people up?
I mean, I can flip it a little bit. I've worked at a few marketing teams that have probably aspired to use something like HubSpot that would actually have given them can really enhance their capabilities and also reduce the time spent on some fairly core activities that they've just literally kind of ignored almost. So, for example, we used to do like collaborative spreadsheets with 5 or 6 different channels who had experts working in them, or experts, and then everybody contributed their results and numbers. That seems very old fashioned, but marketing teams still do that. But then I think the point that I'm sort of working up to is that kind of real big cheerleader to cheerlead something at the right level, kind of an extension of maybe that resistance to change thing. But I think also that kind of buy-in enough people at the top level to actually manage to grease the wheels enough to overcome some fairly subjective, sort of dissonance, if you like, and actually move into we're going to do this. We're going to, we're not going to see all the problems. We're going to see all the benefits. And that's a big thing, especially if you're being asked to do, continue to maintain your status quo and move into and learn a whole new set of skills, especially if you're using half a dozen point tools. And all of a sudden, you kind of get attached to those things, you know how they work, you know how, to set up workflows in there. All of a sudden you've got HubSpot, which is totally different. And although HubSpot's wonderful in many ways, it still needs learning. It's still a tricky and can seem vertiginous, I think, sometimes.
Great. Well, that's the word of the day so far.
Apologies.
So can we only capture that in the chat so I can copy that later. Chris Carolan, what you can riff on the 2 points made, add something else. What are you thinking? Why does it go wrong?
Oh man. Thanks for saving the awareness topic for me. But in this case, awareness of like what the team is actually supposed to be doing, like what is everybody's job? Like what do they actually need to do to complete the processes that somebody else has likely asked them to do at the time you presented them with HubSpot? Because no matter how much excitement you have, like as soon as I've got to get an email out to a customer and then I go into the system I'm supposed to use and I can't do that easily, immediately switching to Outlook or whatever process I'm used to doing. And it only takes 1 or 2 times for that to happen where now HubSpot has lost all credibility. And until I have a reason to go back in, I'm not doing it. I might participate in meetings, like, do a lot of head nodding and stuff like that. But I think that's where so much assumption gets made as to like how, like people knowing how they're supposed to be using it. Also, we come back to why. And that's where no matter how much I love HubSpot, I love the phrase or the statement, the best CRM is the one that gets used.
Yeah.
Right.
Brilliant.
And if that's a collection of Outlook and Excel sheets and like the whole team is using that, right, that's going to keep working for them until you show them how those things can be done inside of HubSpot. And luckily over the last year, the updates to the index page where you can just say, look, this works just like a spreadsheet now. So just here's like, and that's how I try to bridge that gap. But yeah, these assumptions about what is known and what is not known, I think is usually where we're falling short.
Yeah, and there's obviously a fear of that unknown as well. To pick up on some of the things Paul was saying, Chris B, you've obviously got a perspective on this from a super side of it, but you've also got the partner perspective as well, because you're obviously a very successful partner before that. What, in your experience, why is it going wrong? Why does it happen?
Yeah, I think the most common that I find, which was validated by like me arriving at Super, was adoption is introduced at the wrong point in the customer journey. So I think the natural flow that people or partners specifically, or anyone that's providing some sort of service, is when I am delivering anything, it starts with discovery and then delivery of the work that I have like now thought about, reviewing it with a customer, and then I go into training, and that's where they think adoption begins, which is the problem, because you're having to adopt, like in the HubSpot use case, adopt like a entire new system all simultaneously, which is super hard to do because HubSpot is a very robust platform. I agree, best CRM, but it's also like overwhelming, especially for people that are new to the CRM or new to HubSpot generally. And so the way that this fails is adoption does not start at the end, adoption starts at the beginning. And so like a really easy way to start to think about greater adoption is by releasing functions and training your end users in real time in more digestible, like bite-sized pieces along the way. That helps drive adoption here at the beginning, as well as in the end state, because they already have familiarity with the platform and how to use X, Y, and Z functions along the way. And this is where like Super shines as a product, because if you introduce, Super and it's delivering your documentation and it's running your like general onboarding process, things like that, like you're using the platform to drive adoption, like even during the sales process, which is even more valuable, because then it transcends not just HubSpot onboarding services, but any service that you're doing, like RevOps or adoption as a service or AI, literally anything. And so that's where I see partners and like onboarding facilitators failing, is introducing it at the wrong time and expecting it to work when it's not.
Yes, I love that. That's brilliant. What about you guys out there in Lisa? We can't see you, but has anybody got any comments to add? I'll throw a a perspective in as well. It's sort of linked to what everybody said, really. But I find data, bad data, let's call it that, is a huge blocker to adoption as well. I hear it over and over, particularly with sales teams. I work mostly with sales teams. And when they think the reporting is inaccurate, which is probably because of the way that they've used HubSpot in the first place, but when they think the reporting is inaccurate, they become extremely reluctant to use HubSpot. The number of times I've heard, well, it's not in HubSpot, but it's I put the meeting in, but it's not there now, or this you've got to have this level of trust in the information that you see that's coming out of it. It's a bit like AI, I guess, isn't it? When we all thought AI was a bit of a joke and it was hallucinating all the time, and actually it was talking crap most of the time. That was now we're realizing just how powerful it is because we're becoming increasingly trusting of the information it's given us. It's exactly the same thing with HubSpot, I think. So in many ways, good adoption starts with good data, and not necessarily just good data that you've cleaned and enriched with Breeze AI, but just good data in terms of its structure, its hierarchies, and that kind of thing. Oh, Peter's. Can we call you in, Peter? Because that would be awesome. How do I get Peter to talk? Can I make him a presenter? That'd work, wouldn't it? I love that point, Peter. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. Do you want to just expand on that leadership point, Peter?
Hi, everyone. I did not expect that, but yeah, fine. I actually don't have a webcam installed at the moment, so it's
Everybody's got an excuse.
lovely,
I'm
lovely,
sure-
right?
I'm sure
Anyway,
you're beautiful.
I think lack of leadership buy-in is a big one, especially when you look at, let's say, the those of a more advanced experience, so to say, including my age range, so to say. I definitely have a lot of gray hair if I would have hair. And I see that it's like a lot of people think like they automatically go to a Salesforce, and same even the boards, they don't know what is possible and what is not possible, and because of that, it's hard to get that buy-in, and that kind of permeates through to a lot of other levels. And that just makes it kind of like double hard, because if you want to have your change management process be a success, you need to have that buy-in. And when we talk about adoption, having those, there's lots of ways to go about it, right? But small wins. I come from the customer success side of things, so I can talk about this forever. But for me, the adoption really is showing those early wins in each direction, both for, let's say, an SDR, but also for a CRO. And that's what we need to do, right? We need to show that we can empower them, augment them, make them better, make them do their job better, be more successful. But as long as we can't show that, show me the money, right? It will always be difficult. And I think you made a good point earlier, Tony. It doesn't matter what tool it is in the end, whether it's HubSpot or whatever. But I have been in the HubSpot enterprise environment for 2.5 years, and we managed to cut 1 million euros on an annual basis in point-to-point tools just by moving stuff into HubSpot. That's it.
Wow.
And
Can I use that number in my next sales call?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's still a lot more on the table, but I'm no more at my this company. So that I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I think it's also, when you talk about sales, it's what can HubSpot deliver? Can it deliver the same bells and whistles as a point, best of breed tool? No. Can it go 80%? Yes, absolutely. Is that sufficient to make you successful? 100%. Is it perfect? No. But I think when I look at the whole market, and I've been in SaaS for a good 20 years, it's the best larger tool that's available that can go end to end from the first touch to renewal.
Brilliant. Thanks, Peter. I'm gonna switch you back off because there's a couple of other comments I want to bring through. Michael, Michael, you got a great point. So sort of echoing what Peter was saying, leaders seem to fear that adoption will replace them, not empower them. Would you also just like to step forward and perhaps expand on that quickly for us, if I can find you, Michael Womack, I'm talking about. I loved your earlier work, by the way, as a pop star. Michael, you're on stage. Leaders are afraid of HubSpot.
You're on mute.
He says he can't right now because
The leaders are
Right
behind
behind
me,
him.
right? Let's
Hang on, let me-
let's
Yeah,
move on.
let
Let's
me
move on.
another spot.
fair enough.
I'll switch you back off. Fair. Chris Grant has jumped in. A surprising amount of companies fear their salespeople. They worry about upsetting the top performers by asking them to do something new. Chris has experienced a HubSpot as anybody on here. Would you like to just step forward quickly and expand on that point? Are you allowed to talk, Chris?
The choice
video.
of Bevy.
A video.
All the buttons are in the wrong place, aren't they? Yeah, absolutely. But it's this thing you keep saying. It's this fear that the traditional black book type salespeople don't want to put their contacts in a CRM because they're worried that then, Dave over there will steal the account or something like that. And it's almost like a lot of companies feel like they're renting contact lists from their salespeople, and they don't want to upset them. The amount of times you just see that of, oh, well, we can get everybody else to do it, but Sarah, she just won't. And immediately you've got that massive problem that, or it's that, well, we've got to sell it to the salespeople properly. And it's that sort of balanced change management approach.
It's always, it keeps coming back to that change management and fear.
Personality and ego can be quite a big thing as well. That sort of, because I think quite a lot of the time, the team on an implementation haven't really worked that closely together. And they're at that sort of almost storming form of your team dynamics, and they don't really know each other. So it can be a big issue.
Well, we certainly worked on that. I'm sure you have worked on implementations where people are meeting each other for
the first, it's
like the first time they've all been in the same room together. It's absolutely insane.
6 people that have never talked to each other suddenly turning up and being asked to completely transform a company.
And Tony, I'm gonna kick you off now. Too many Chris's on the screen though. We'll get rid of you. I can't find you. I can't find you to switch you off. To keep talking, everybody. Chris Grant. Where's it, Chris Grant? Everyone. Goodness gracious.
Too many Chris's.
There's too many Chris's. There you are. I've got you. Thanks, Chris. I'm gonna pull Chris there. Yeah, I'm gonna pull Tony up. My namesake, because he's got a very interesting point about HubSpot's reputation. Tony, if you're able, it would be lovely if you expand on that.
Yeah, of course. We had to balance the Tony to Chris ratio.
Yes.
I like it. Yeah. One thing that I see a lot out there, especially in people are saying, should I choose HubSpot or Salesforce or HubSpot versus something else? A lot of the comments I see are very surprising in that people say, oh, you don't want HubSpot. They're for small company. They're for medium businesses. And a lot of times the people are asking are early stage startups, often pre-revenue. So the idea that this pre-revenue startup, as fast as they might grow, are going to outpace HubSpot's ability to launch new features on the CRM side is crazy to me. There's this idea that it can't be customized. It can't be form fit to your unique business. And that may have been true 10 years ago, 9 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. But they just hit warp speed in the features and functionality. And I think that's one of the things that is really holding back a lot of companies from adopting it on the sales side, where they may bring it in on the marketing side and then want to integrate with something else.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. I'm going to quickly move on because we are going to run out of time otherwise. But I think the last big webinar we did that really kicked off was a Salesforce. Dare I say it? Was a Salesforce versus HubSpot. What was it, Chris? It was a LinkedIn Live or something. I think it was LinkedIn Live. Can't remember.
It was a LinkedIn Live.
It was chaos. It just degenerated into name calling, and hair pulling, and people were punching and biting. It was awesome. But so much of it, as to Tony's point there, so much of it was based on the reputations, what people thought of HubSpot and thought of Salesforce, as opposed to where they are. Yeah, Chris, we'll send you the recording. It was an absolutely brilliant laugh. Okay, we've covered what goes wrong, why it goes wrong. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of the chat. How do we fix it? Reverse order again. Chris Barnett, Chris B, you're primarily, like we are, you're primarily in this sort of adoption space. Do you want to kick us off with how you think we solve the adoption? We close the adoption gap, which is the terminology that we like to use, the space between buying HubSpot and getting to work in your organization.
Yeah. So I think there's two things that I would focus on. One is when you're battling friction with team members or egos or things like that, the easiest way, in my perspective and experience, to overcome that is tying these things to like levels of business acumen. Meaning, like, if a sales rep does not understand how these changes help benefit the organization and help drive revenue and help like them be empowered and able to do their job better, that is like lack of business acumen. And most people that are successful sales reps have very good business acumen. And so being like transparent and willing enough and vulnerable enough to understand, like, we need you to do this because of X, Y, and Z for the business. Usually it's a pretty easy conversation in my experience, whether they're a top performer or not. Secondarily, I think adoption begins with designing for the end user, right? Sometimes best practice is fine, but what's even better is designing for the end user, in the sense of, will the actual users of this functionality think this is clunky, or they feel empowered and able to use what I've designed? And so that's adoption at its finest, like I said at the very beginning. And introducing adoption at the beginning of that journey is extremely important. So it's about what you've designed and what is introduced when that design is introduced, and how it's reiterated in terms of value to them and to the business gradually over time. That's how you can begin to close the adoption gap.
Yeah, I love it. Brilliant. Other Chris. That's a terrible name. How do we fix it? We've got about 20 shows on this.
Yeah. You got to start with trust. Like, so many assumptions are made, especially inside of the HubSpot ecosystem, about what people do or don't know, what they have dealt with in the past, right? And, I got a lot of people right now talking about GTM in general being broken, and like all these things that we've been used to doing, for a long time. Meanwhile, you still have these long tenured sales journeymen that have just never stopped crushing it. And they are the ones that didn't necessarily get on board with the SaaS fad, right? And finding a way to get to trust with them takes understanding, like digging in a little bit, more than, finding quick wins, right? These guys and gals, they will endure an immense amount of pain to carry out a process that they know will be completed or will get the job done. So saving 15 minutes on a meeting link or an email template or whatever doesn't mean anything if they don't know where it's going. Like, they can't go back and see what happened easily. And whenever it breaks down to say, like, yes, this will happen, and then they go and try and do that thing, and then it doesn't happen, you lose trust immediately, if you even had it in the first place, right? Because most trusting, in teams that have been working together, they'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but they are quick to, pull it if they've got a serious job to do, which they always do. And because that's the kind of thing that will get in the way of of them closing business, right? And nobody will get behind you if the lead or anybody on the sales team is saying, this is getting in the way of me closing deals.
Yeah, brilliant. And what we talk a lot about psychological safety when it comes to the change management piece, that this idea that you're in an org that is supporting you to make these changes, supporting you in effect It's going to allow you to make some mistakes. It's going to allow you to embark on the learning curve, which will see your performance duck. You don't get a lot of buy-in for that. It's usually the opposite. And okay, so we're going to introduce a new platform. It's got to be done in 2 weeks. And by the way, we don't expect your call rate to drop. We don't expect your conversion rate to be affected. Then you should be bringing in exactly the same money as you were before. That trust really is a vital aspect. Thanks, Chris. Rich, you're delivering CRMs all the time. What's your trick? What's your tip for the top?
So I believe that all of the things, but the one thing I'm going to pick out is definitely in support. Not just necessarily with the user group that you start your potentially with your project, where you may be building process from new because you're trying to convert into HubSpot, or you're trying to make the most of the sort of optimizations and automations in HubSpot. But then when you really solidify that into, repeatable, accessible, easy training, sort of, whether that be sort of, I like the idea of training being pushed to you when you need it, almost like those little hover points that you can just hover over and it tells you what something is. And of course, I don't want to sound like a complete and utter toady, but we absolutely use Supered for that, because it's absolutely bang on point for that. And I'm a great believer in that. If you can push all of that information to people, where they need it, when they need it, in a really easy way. I mean, the amount of people I've actually heard say, forget HubSpot, but you actually say, so we do it like this. And they say, oh, blimey, that would be so useful for X, for Y. And it's like, well, yeah, but you could still use it for X and Y. It's not necessarily exclusively HubSpot. And for example, if you've got a LinkedIn campaign that you want to run it in a certain way, you want to optimize it, you can start to deploy that into the LinkedIn space through, various means and methods, or just have it in the sidebar in your browser, which I just think is incredibly powerful. And as your business becomes more complex, it becomes harder to do things like onboard people. But if you've got all of that information in the background, you can kind of almost give them a sort of a lift up. But then also it's like, you can learn as you go because it's all there. Maybe not for all roles, but certainly for some marketing and sales stuff. And I just think that is just insanely powerful. And like I say, we obviously work with Supered on that, but nevertheless, going away and finding something in a Word document on some sort of network drive to find out how to do your LinkedIn campaign, that sounds like a ball ache from start to finish, to be honest. So yeah, I believe fully in training and support and getting that as close to the user as possible.
Lovely. Thanks, Rich. Paul, before I pull you into the conversation again, Leanne, lovely Leanne. We know Leanne. She always comes to the South Wales Hug. She's requested presenter mode. Is that right, Leanne? I'm gonna give it to you whether you're ready or not. Have you got?
No, sorry. I think I must have accidentally connected. I am just on free screen.
So you've got nothing to add. You're literally.
No, I'm just snooping. Don't mind me, Tony.
I got very excited there for a moment. I thought, God, the listeners are revolting. Okay, thanks, Leanne. I'll kick you back off. As we were then, Paul, please bring up the rear, round us up. Some big themes emerging here. What are you thinking about how you put adoption right?
Okay, I'm surprised. Maybe I missed something, but I'm surprised the word alignment hasn't been dropped yet. Oh, there we go. There are a couple of things to align, really. Getting back to my previous point on the management effectiveness side of things. Managers have this dynamic because most of them actually aren't trained to be managers, and they're put in these positions because they're super operators and they can solve all these problems really well, and they just become, professional firefighters. And so when they have this big issue like an initiative like implementing or adopting HubSpot, they're balancing two things. One is what's good for them to do, what's going to keep them safe in the organization, and what's good for the organization. And bottom line is it's going to be what's good for them. So the key thing then is how do we align HubSpot to the organizational goals? And that's like, we've got to cascade those goals all the way down the organization through the manager, involve the manager in the opportunity to achieve those goals, maybe even exceed those goals. and they themselves being enabled by their departments, which are in turn enabled by the resource they've made available to them, generate more deals, which in turn generates more sales, which in turn is represented as ultimately as revenue on the income statement. So there are things to align, dots to connect, and it's not an easy thing to do because you don't just go and say, I've got HubSpot and it's going to do it for you. Those problems of misalignment most probably already exist in an organization when HubSpot gets there. And if you try and implement HubSpot into a misaligned organization, all it's going to do, if it works, is turbocharge the misalignment, which is not going to be very good. So you've got to actually fix things in the organization, get the groundwork in place before you even put HubSpot in there. And then through that, build the confidence of the manager that this is something that they can do and that there is success at the end of the tunnel for them as well as a business.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. We're just about there. We're a bit longer than I thought we were going to be, but hopefully we're still within time for everybody. I'm going to wrap up, but if anybody's got any questions, as Leanne did, put your hand up and you're more than welcome to come onto the stage with us or pop them into the chat so we can ask these experts while we've got them here about adoption or anything else, maybe their favorite meal or best film for a Friday night. I don't know, whatever questions you've got, pop them in the chat. But big themes, it really interests me how much this conversation has moved on since I've been a HubSpot partner, which is about 6 years now, from very standard, I'm a HubSpot certified trainer, like Chris Grant, like Chris Barnett is, and I hazard that they were of the same view here. We used to just talk about teaching people how to use the tool. Adoption was about, this is how you send an email. This is how you connect your 365 extension. This is how Google integrates with HubSpot and so on and so on. But today we've been talking about these really big organizational wide ideas. Chris is talking about HubSpot. Chris Carolan talking about HubSpot as a platform, as a customer platform. And I think this move, it is demonstrated by the conversation today. We're talking about alignment, organizational alignment from top down to the bottom. We're talking about the time when the timing is right to introduce adoption. A fascinating idea, Are we going to build everything in our own image, set it all up, and then try to teach people how to use it after the fact? Well, clearly not. Training generally, and as Chris puts it, awareness, if you like, of what's even possible. And change management just keep coming up, doesn't it? Management, change management, fear just kept coming up all the time. It's no wonder that we have such a difficult job to do when it comes to adoption. And I think we're realizing why adoption is such a big deal, because when it fails, everything fails. The whole of the HubSpot installation fails. So I'll leave you with this thought, right? I think to go along with the development of HubSpot as a customer platform, we need to develop a different way of doing adoption. We call it Management Led Onboarding or Management Led Adoption. And you can hear why we talk about it the way that we talk about it, because of the views that the experts have expounded on today. It's not just about training people bottom up. It is about grabbing the management teams and enabling them to utilize HubSpot to run their businesses. That's how you say it. I keep begging others to join me at Inbound. That was an eye-opening event. Thank you, Michael, as a really good comment as well. Inbound is the heart of the movement. And I know there are those of us at the other side of the pond who've been there probably quite a few times now. That is a very good shout. But unless there are any very specific questions, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll send the recording out. I'm sure you'll get loads of value out of it. From our perspective, me and Chris Carolan perspective, you'll see us every Monday talking about this sort of stuff. Me and Rich, you'll see us talking about it on the Real Inbound podcast as well. And we're gonna get Crispy back just because his name's so fantastic.
As well, just put that in there.
Say it again.
Well, and he's an Arsenal supporter.
And he's an Arsenal supporter. Yeah. Well, you can't. There's no accounting for taste, is it? And Liverpool are going to be the champions. But anyway,
won it yet?
Not yet.
Thank you, everybody. I'll see you all again soon.